Good evening, everybody. It's now 7 p.m. It is February 29th, 2016. This makes it a leap day. So just think, if you're born in 1948, happy 16th birthday. You can now get your driver's license on this day in 1948. We did not have a closed session tonight. I understand tonight's meeting will be recorded and played later on Rogers Cable. They're at the hockey game tonight, which we're not. We're moving into the regular meeting. Any additional items? Councillor Thomas.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I have an item on the 2015 Lieutenant Governor's Ontario Heritage Awards. Brief item about the Police Services Act consultations that are coming up, and I'd like to mention quickly the Community Job Fair, which is coming up this Thursday.
Good. Anyone else? Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. I have a report on being at the Good Roads Conference last week.
Good. Any others? Councillor Dodd, do you want to report on Good Roads or anything? No?
Not on Tuesday night.
Okay, good. And I've got some items that I'll review as well of what I've been doing the last couple of weeks. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Anyone? Seeing none. Confirmation of minutes. Councillor Gregg.
Moved by Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Dodd, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on February 8th, 2016 as printed be adopted.
And all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next one.
Moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor Wright, that the minutes of the public meeting, OPA 6, Zoning Bylaw Amendment 18, Draft Plan of Subdivision Red Hawk held on February 8th, 2016, as printed be adopted.
Great, thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Thanks. Down to number 6, resolution moving council into committee of the whole.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor O'Leary, that City Council now go into committee of the whole to consider public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising for correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business.
And all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So we're now in committee of the whole, down to number 7 on our agenda, just public meetings. We have no public meetings. And then down to number 8, deputations. So we're kicking off tonight with kind of a special deputation, recognizing Black History Month in February, though it's the last day. We are welcoming this evening Michaela Crusoebrink. Michaela is a 12-year-old Owen Sound resident in grade 7 at Harvest Canadian Reformed Christian School. Her teacher, Ann Hutton, advises that Michaela recently entered a speech contest with the topic of the Underground Railway. She placed first in the local competition and first again in the regional competition. Michaela chose this topic because she is fascinated by the courageous acts of the abolitionists and those who were seeking their freedom. So we welcome Michaela.
Let me in, please! The slave catchers are coming! Honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and fellow contestants. Could you imagine running for your life and having to trust strangers to guide you to your freedom using an underground railroad? So what was this underground railroad? Do you think it was a train traveling on railroad tracks under the ground? Well, that's what I first thought of when I heard about the Underground Railroad. But really, it was a secret network of safe houses, codes, routes, passageways, lawbreakers, and freedom seekers. As early as the 1600s, Africans were taken from their homeland, and they were brought to the southern parts of the United States, where they became slaves to white masters. The slaves usually lived in very poor conditions. They were beaten, they did not have a lot to eat, and they were separated from their families. The Underground Railroad began in the 1800s by a community in Philadelphia who wanted to help the slaves from the South get to the free northern states or even to Canada. These people were known as abolitionists and were dedicated to abolishing slavery, as well as helping as many slaves as they could get to freedom. Some abolitionists agreed to help out on the railroad. The abolitionists would set up their houses as stations or depots, where the slaves could stop, eat, rest, change their clothes, and hide from their masters. Then, when it was dark again, the slaves would be given directions to the next station. The owner of the house would be called the station master. The Underground Railroad didn't have a main route, but it ran through many southern and northern states. The abolitionists would sometimes dress in disguise and sneak onto the plantations to tell the slaves about the Underground Railroad, and if they were willing to go, the abolitionists would lead them to their first station. The slaves would know if a house was part of the Underground Railroad or not if there was a lit candle in the window or lanterns on their porch. When the masters had found out that the slaves had escaped, they'd hire slave catchers to find their slaves for a reward of money. The slave catchers would go through swamps with their bloodhounds. They'd even go door to door. Station masters developed very sneaky ways to help the slaves avoid the slave catchers. Often they'd put quilts on their doorsteps or on their clotheslines, which would have codes on them, such as the monkey wrench, which meant to prepare all the things you had for a long journey, or the bow tie, which meant that the slave catchers were around and you had to put on a disguise. Also, the abolitionists themselves talked in codes. They called the male slaves hardware and freights, and the female slaves dried goods and cargo. This is a sample letter using some of those codes. Dear Mrs. Callahan, I have 3 boxes of hardware and 2 boxes of dried goods. I'm giving them to you free. If you don't want them, you can give them to a man in Kentucky. Sincerely, Mr. Smith. Another really cool thing about the Underground Railroad was that they had secret passageways. Slaves were not safe, even if they were in a station master's house. If a slave catcher all of a sudden knocked on the door, the station master would move a chest or slide a shelf, and there would be a secret compartment for the slaves to hide in. Other stations also had secret compartments under rugs or behind fake walls. But hiding slaves was very, very dangerous. People caught helping slaves could be fined hundreds or even thousands of dollars and a jail time of up to 1 year. Some even got whipped. But if you were black, you could be burned or even hung. The Underground Railroad went to many places. But did you know that the Underground Railroad stopped in Owen Sound? A lot of slaves came to Owen Sound to find better job offers. So every year since 1862, Harrison Park holds an emancipation picnic in honor of the freed slaves. This year, they're having their 153rd anniversary. So altogether, the Underground Railroad lasted about 60 years and helped an estimated 100,000 slaves reach freedom. Now that's something to celebrate. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was great. I bet you we've got other comments. Councillor Lemon, I bet you wants to say something.
Well, first of all, that was simply excellent. We know why you won. And you hit on a lot of the highlights. But one thing a lot of people don't realize is Admiral Owen, who first mapped this area, was actually an abolitionist as well. So Owen Sound, the northern terminus of the Underground Railway, was first mapped by an abolitionist, and later, of course, many, many slaves came here. At one time, 1/3 of our population was black. That's how many slaves came to Owen Sound to find freedom. And I was also told, and I have no written proof of this, that a couple of slave catchers came from the United States illegally up to this area. And apparently they got lost in the long swamp. Nobody knows what happened to them, but they didn't get any slaves to take back. But that was wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Leary, do you have your hand up there?
I did. Michaela, I got to read your speech in Uncle Barry's office, and he told me that it was 10 times better when you say it. And guess what? He was right. That was fantastic. Thanks for coming. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Anybody that end? Jim? No? Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you. Michaela, did you by any chance enter into was it the Grey County speech that you were involved in?
No, I don't
No,
think so.
it
Just
wasn't.
the Legion, Chatsworth Legion.
I see. I thought maybe I'd get to hear it again, but unfortunately, if you didn't, I won't. But it was very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thank you very much. Well done. Oh, Councillor Gregg's hand went up.
Yeah, I'll just echo the other sentiments. That was pretty terrific. There's no doubt about it. I also, our business is located right across the road from here in a building that had secret passageways and was the one of the locations in Owen Sound where the slaves were able to meet their freedom. So that's pretty cool association that we have also with the history of our community. And I think it's kind of neat to mention as well that I believe a week ago our MPP stood up in Parliament and mentioned it being Black History Month. And kudos to Councillor Lemon, who was mentioned by our MPP Walker on the success and the construction of the ceremonial plaque and structure at Harrison Park, noting the emancipation. So.
There's a certain irony in this, in that a certain uncle, this young lady, was the contractor who did the actual construction work for us. So what goes around comes around. That's wonderful.
So Michaela, thank you very much. It's wonderful that you're doing research on our own history and sharing it with your age group and passing it on and keeping it alive. And the same as you've just heard, Councillor Lemon's kept it alive for many years. We look forward to what you do next year and the year after and the year after that. Well done. Thanks for bringing it to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the poor fellow that has to follow that with the next deputation is Carl Sider from the Drinking Water Source Protection. Welcome.
I appreciate the introduction, and I was actually going to share the same sentiment that I'm glad I got to hear such a nice speech, but unfortunately my topic might not be nearly as entertaining. So,
well, we're expecting you to be just as entertaining. So,
Your Worship, councillors, staff. Sorry.
Try that again?
We're here today to talk about the Drinking Water Source Protection Program. And specifically, we're focused on the events-based area work that was conducted related to fuel threats to drinking water intakes. And Owen Sound was one of the communities that were modeled, and the study focused on potential threats to drinking water source in Owen Sound. I'll go through, is it this here? Slide advancer. Oh, okay. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. So I'll just touch on a little bit of the background, what brought us to the stage of the program update, and a little bit about what work we did to address some of the comments and concerns. The Source Protection Plan, as is, was recently approved by the Minister of Environment and Climate Change on October 16th, and it has an effective date of July the 1st, so the plan and the policies that are in it come into effect starting in July 1st. And in the Minister's approval letter, it was noted that there were some parts of the plan that were removed, and he anticipated that they would be resubmitted hopefully by the end of March was our target date. And with that target date in mind, there was also the intention or interest to have the policies that were being resubmitted to have the same effective date of July the 1st. The ministry recently made an announcement to allow for funding to support the newly affected municipalities as a result of these additions to the source protection plan, and that would be effective essentially when the plan is submitted for approval. If all communities were endorsing that submission. So again, that would require some discussion with the affected municipalities and the ministry to flow that transfer of money to help with the implementation. In terms of how we got an update to the plan and to this stage where we're before municipalities and public consultation, we established a technical advisory working group with the 8 municipalities that were being affected by these proposed amendments. And I'd like to acknowledge your Director of Operations, who actually suggested this approach to address the comments and concerns. And so we struck this working group to really talk through those concerns and to come up with some reasonable policies and wording that could be supportive. So we had 3 meetings of this group starting back in July, and we got to a point where there was consensus around the table that these were workable policies for resubmission and for public consultation purposes. I'll get into a bit of what the draft wording of the policies are, but I think the map helps to visualize and understand a bit of the area that would be affected and what thresholds really the policies would kick in. Because the wording itself is a fair bit complicated, but essentially the zones, so the light green area, the blue and the purple, have different volumes of fuel storage that if you had a spill of that amount could result in a potential impact on the drinking water source. And those are the volumes that were modeled as part of the study. So you have the 15,000, 25,000, and 50,000 liter area. So if a fuel tank of that size were to release, it could make its way into the harbor and potentially have an impact beyond the drinking water standard at your intake. So that's the premise of the modeling and the zones that were delineated. And essentially in the 3 zones, this is the threshold or the amount of fuel that if you're a landowner or an operator, anything above that would kick you into the requirements to establish a risk management plan for your facility or your property. Take a moment to kind of absorb that. So the wording then in the draft policies just speak to what's on the map. And looking at risk management plan policy for those 3 areas, and that's for existing and future activities. So looking at existing properties, and if a future fuel handling or storage facility were to open, they would have the same requirements. And it would only kick in once you exceed those thresholds. The next part of the policy talks about the potential for expansion or replacement of existing fuel storage, which would be permitted if it's demonstrated that to the satisfaction of the risk management official that the expansion or replacement provides greater integrity. And essentially, that's suggesting that any new facility has constantly improving standards and requirements to meet, and essentially a new facility would be an improvement upon an old facility that, maybe the tanks were older and were at a lower standard. In terms of the content of a risk management plan, the basic requirements are laid out here in terms of what we would expect to be included in a risk management plan. And things like the product handling, storage, record keeping, disposal method, spill response plans, and containment measures. And these are very typical of what this industry is used to having in these similar types of plans, and as they are regulated by other agencies such as the Technical Standard Safety Authority or Environment Canada. These are fairly typical types of plans for their industry. I might note too that during our public open house that we held on February the 3rd, some of the industry representatives came and we explained the process, and they were obviously comfortable with the types of plans that we were suggesting. In terms of the timeframes, we're looking at a time frame of 3 years to inventory all of these sites, so we have an understanding of where all of these fuel handling and storage facilities are, and up to 5 years to implement a risk management plan. So that's a negotiated plan with the landowners to have that in place within 5 years. So it gives us some time to implement this policy. That being said, if some are very open and willing to do that sooner, we'd be more than willing to facilitate that work with them. The next policy it says a lot without really, its main intent is that when we're doing screening for any land use or planning activities in this area, we're only really concerned about fuel handling and storage activities. So any new type of development, we're not going to be looking at those types of things unless there's a fuel handling and storage component to that planning application. So for this area, it's just the fuel handling and storage threats that were identified as a concern.
So I can just ask there, we're talking about gasoline,
Yes.
petroleum, oil, diesels,
Yes.
propane?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So liquid fuels that contain benzene, which was what was modeled, that can flow and potentially contaminate the waterways. Yes.
Okay. Sure, please.
Can I ask you, just looking at your map, I have absolutely no idea what is the distance there? Is there somewhere, I can't read the corner writing on that because
Yeah.
it goes blurry, but what is the distance we're looking at?
So in the greenish zone, just to give you a reference, that's the industrial park, up on the hill there where one of the pathways there, the Kenny Drain, is a potential source. Up to the 2,500 liter or 25,000, that's up near the hospital. In the 50,000 liter zone, maybe we're talking, less than a kilometer away from.
So that's meters that you're talking about, the
So
figures
those-
that you have on
those-
there.
Those numbers, they're actually volumes of fuel that can be stored. Anything below that isn't a threat from the modeling's perspective. Anything above that kicks them into a requirement for a risk management plan.
Okay, and then the purple, what is the distance from the bay through to the purple? Although there's rivers running through there that feed into the bay. Do they
Yeah.
have an effect then?
They do, and that's typically what was used to help draw those lines
Okay.
and create the. So
Okay.
they looked at all the rivers as pathways to the bay, and they looked at a 2-hour time of travel to say a contaminant could get into the river or the storm drain, and during a big rainstorm event get flushed out fairly quickly into the bay.
Okay, well, that gives me a better understanding.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The next policy is discussing the need for road signs in this, around the perimeter of this area, on some of the major roads, and essentially what that policy is talking about is a public awareness piece, not only for the public but for first responders. If they're out and there is a spill of this nature, there's an understanding or awareness that it is a vulnerable area, and a fuel spill has the potential to reach the bay and potentially impact drinking water sources. So at this stage, we are out to the affected municipalities seeking council's resolutions endorsing the proposed amendments to the source protection plan. And we would definitely report back on the status of the proposed amendments based on public consultation and ministry review if there are any changes. At this point in time, we haven't had any comments noting the concerns. We've been getting good support and resolutions from the affected municipalities and from the public. And essentially, we would have to come back to get your support or concurrence on the effective date of these policies once they go through ministry approval.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Mr. Beckings. I think we've had a look at this already, haven't we?
Yes, Your Worship. The general recommendations that have been presented here to full council this evening were in fact addressed by the Operations Committee in January. The minutes have since come forward to council, and council has endorsed them, so effectively given approval. I have to apologize to council that it wasn't my understanding that we required a council resolution to endorse the recommendations, and hence the reason why in the item of correspondence for which council's action is required, there is a recommended endorsement resolution for your consideration.
Good. Thank you.
If I can just add to, we learned in the last month as well from the ministry that was also an added step in the process, so it was news to all of us.
So it's a moving, the province can be a moving target.
Yes.
Sometimes. Thanks. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Would it be appropriate to move item 10A up, and that's the letter from the chair of the committee, Mike Traynor, asking for a resolution?
Okay, anybody opposed to that? Councillor Lemon, you opposed to that?
No, I wanted to speak.
Okay, so we'll move that up. Good, thank you. If you want to go ahead.
The one thing I find very interesting in here is, I don't disagree with what you're doing. I certainly support it, but one of the things that when ships come into the Port of Owen Sound, they are carrying fairly large fuel loads. And they're literally right on top of the water intake. I believe the water intake goes out into the ship channel. Is there any consideration of that danger to the water system?
Yeah, I appreciate that concern, and it really comes down to jurisdiction in some respects. That the fact that this was a provincial program for source water protection and doesn't have jurisdiction over federally regulated operations such as shipping. That being said, a lot of the measures that get put in place, I think there's benefit to continue to push the program to deal with future threats and deal with things, as you noted, such as shipping. We're also interested in transportation of, large fuel transportation that's going, across the roadways near the harbor. So these are definitely concerns that for future amendments.
The reason I'm asking that is we've had some great ecological disasters, which have been ships sinking or hitting each other or whatever. And a large amount of fuel is moved on the Great Lakes. And that's something that we should be thinking about. They say shipping by ship is much safer than shipping by truck, and it may well be, but the amounts of fuel that some of those vessels carry is immense.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
I just wanted to ask, looking at the map here with the different limits you've given in different areas, is there an impact on existing businesses by approving this tonight? And if so, what is the impact? What are they liable for as a result?
Yeah, so that's a good point. And so with the approval, if that effective date of July 1st stands, then that would start the clock in terms of having 3 years to go out and inventory the affected properties and landowners. We have a sense of what those properties are and sent letters to all the properties that we thought might be impacted by this. So they have 3 years to inventory this area and then 5 years to negotiate a risk management plan to ensure that they are meeting the requirements of the policy.
I just follow up. So what would the financial impact be then on businesses that are impacted by this plan?
So quite negligible. If they already have these response plans and emergency plans in place, then they wouldn't need to recreate them. And there might be a nominal fee, to negotiate that plan, but fairly small in terms of the type of operations we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
I think Mr. Becking may have an explanation as well.
I think just to add to Mr. Sater's comment, many of the requirements for a risk management plan are frankly already in existence as a result of other legislation. TSSA is probably the more prominent of them. It's largely an inventory process and making sure that those risk management strategies are in place for those businesses that are above the threshold. And so I would expect that the financial impact on them will be minimal.
Thank you. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will recall late last year, we've been involved in the source water protection plan for quite some time. Our city representative is Bill Twaddle on that committee, and things were moving along fairly well until late last fall, where a plan was sort of dropped on us that we didn't agree with. I do want to thank the Source Water Protection Committee, Mr. Sider, Mr. Becking, and the chair, Mike Traynor, and our city rep, Bill Twaddle, who all sat down together and said, okay, this plan doesn't work, what can work? And it was a very collaborative effort, and I think we've come across something that, of course, it's important to protect our water intake. Let's try and work through this. So the risk management plan process has been described. It isn't felt that it should be too onerous. Most of the companies that have these large fuel storage tanks already have these types of things in place. It's just documenting it, make sure it's up to date. We do have to appoint a risk management officer. We think we can do that in-house, and a lot of the other measures, quite honestly, public education, of course, that's good. Putting up road signs, that type of thing, letting people know about vulnerable areas, that's all good. So I want to thank all those involved with putting their heads together and coming up with a system, with this draft policy that meets our needs. I do, whenever Your Worship, you're ready, I do have a formal motion I could make that is required by the ministry, whenever you'd like me to make it.
Okay, did you have a question?
No.
Okay,
Sorry, Councillor McManaman answered my question.
so Councillor Gregg?
Thank you very much, and I also would like just to congratulate our Director of Operations, because this report here is a far big improvement from what we saw 1 year ago. And when Source Water first went out across the agricultural community, because that's where it started. It was a hammer on the head, and they wouldn't take it, and they fought back. And that essentially is what happened here. This is a tremendous improvement. So congratulations to the director as well for his work. I would just like to mention, I believe it is true here that some of this stuff is contingent upon there being funding from the Ministry of Environment, such as road signs. I just don't want to support something here such as road signs and some of the educational stuff and not have the funding come through to support it. So you're able to for sure
Yes.
indicate that's, and if we don't get the funding,
Yeah.
then we don't need to put up the road signs.
That's not necessarily true. Once the policies come into effect, they would have to be implemented. What I can tell you, though, is that the ministry has given an assurance that funding is going to be made available to Owen Sound and the other affected municipalities. So,
Thank you. That answers it.
I just have a question. Councillor McManaman, you referred to an in-house person to do what, monitor?
Mr. Snyder could answer
Yeah.
better, but we need a risk management officer to document the number that there are in those protection zones that were talked about, come up with the plans. Well, not, maybe I'd best let him
no,
answer.
that's a perfect intro. The requirements under the Clean Water Act are for implementation purposes. It's up to municipalities to establish a risk management office or officer to oversee and facilitate the implementation of these policies. There is also the option under the Clean Water Act to delegate those responsibilities to another agency, and in some cases, some municipalities are choosing the Conservation Authority to do that work on their behalf. And that's an internal decision.
So does this affect every municipality in Grey County?
Grey and Bruce County, in terms of the plan and the requirements, it does.
So each municipality within Grey County being lower tiers is expected to have somebody looking after it. It's not something we can, well, you just said we could contract to upper tier if we
Yeah,
wanted to pool
some are
resources.
considering that option or teaming up with another municipality. So there's various ways to meet
Okay.
that obligation.
Good, so it's, the option's open. Good,
Yes.
thank you. Go ahead.
And just on that point, committee did look at both options, felt that the in-house one was the most economical for the city.
You want to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you. Moved by myself, Your Worship, that in consideration of the notice dated January 13th, 2016 in your minutes, and a request for endorsement of the proposed amendments to the approved source protection plan in the Saugeen, Grey Sauble, Northern Bruce Peninsula Source Water Protection Region related to events-based threats, and the presentation made by Mr. Carl Cedar, Source Protection Committee, and comments by the city's Director of Operations, City Council hereby resolves the following: that pursuant to subsection 34-3 of the Clean Water Act 2006, we hereby endorse the proposed amendments to the Source Protection Plan in the Saugeen, Grey Sauble, Northern Bruce Peninsula Source Protection Region to address significant drinking water threats arising from fuel storage near Great Lakes intakes, and further, the copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Drinking Water Source Protection Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
I'm just getting a little concerned and getting actually even more concerned about what costs are going to be to the municipality of this. You're indicating that we're going to need a person to do the inventory and all of this. I thought that's what Source Water Protection was doing.
So in terms of implementation, once the plan comes into effect, there is the requirement to oversee that these risk management plans, for example, are established with the affected properties. In terms of for Owen Sound, and I understand the approach that's being suggested, there are a limited number of properties where this applies. It is fairly small. So this is looking at what internal resources and staffing in perhaps a planning department that are already overseeing applications and already overseeing works that could take on this workload to negotiate or oversee that these plans get implemented. From our analysis of the cost, it was fairly small for Owen Sound, given the size of the area that's being impacted.
I just am a little afraid this is going to become one of those things that starts off small and gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
It's a fair comment, and we're actually starting to do some of this work for other municipalities. And in this case, it's actually the opposite. We actually started with the worst case scenario of how many properties might be affected, and it actually will shrink when we actually go out and do those assessments and realize that they already have all their plans in place, and it's a mere sign off to an ongoing monitoring of those properties. I can understand your concern. We're finding that it is actually, as time goes on, this program will shrink.
Other comments, questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Lemon's opposed. Otherwise, it carries. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Becking, the whole committee, thanks.
Thank you.
So next in deputations is 8C, being Paulette Parole, Tourism Manager Coordinator with regard to Savour Owen Sound. Welcome. I saw that whole carton of goodies back there on the press table, and I figured they're having a picnic.
People have been seeing it at my desk lately, and I've been getting a few comments, actually. This is the draw prize basket that we will be actually selecting the winner for tonight. I'll tell you more about the goodies in it in a moment. But Savour Owen Sound, for those of you who aren't already familiar with it, it's back for a fourth delicious year, and it's all about the chance to eat, drink, and indulge without guilt in Owen Sound. We have 11 restaurants taking part this year, which is a record. I'm very pleased about that. It's showing how popular it is among our restaurants. 11 of them are in downtown Owen Sound as well. It's a marketing initiative by the City of Owen Sound to stimulate spending in the restaurant and the dining sector during what's traditionally a slower time of year. We're trying to get people out of hibernation, coming out not only to dine, but also enjoy an attack hockey game, a show at the Roxy, live music, and other things that are happening in winter in Owen Sound. So it is generating a lot of interest so far. We've been marketing it through the radio and local newspapers and online as well. And the restaurants this year, as you can see, there's Elsie's Diner, some of the new ones, Elsie's Casero's Kitchen Table, the Avalon Jazz Lounge, and the Curry House. Those are all new to Savour Owen Sound. We also have Nathaniel's, Shorty's Grill, Jasmine's, Harrison Park Inn, Norma Jean's Bistro, Villanina Bistro, Sweetwater Restaurant at Cobble Beach. If you can eat at all 11, congratulations. And this is the gift basket. And this has been put together. It's worth, the value is probably over $120 here. You're looking at a lot of beer, wine, and other goodies from, yes, this is Clan beer here. I don't know if anybody's tried Xanadu before. It's one of their new brews. We also have Forbidden Cider from Coffin Ridge Winery, some ale from McLean's Ale, sapsucker water. If anybody's ever tried sapsucker maple water, it's actually from the trees and not yet processed. Ironwood Coffee, and Ironwood Coffee is a new brewer up in the Big Bay area. We also have some gifts from Heritage Place Mall, from the Frog Ponds Cafe, Meredith's Ginger Syrup, cookbooks, and even a free lunch from the Ginger Press Cafe, and also gift certificates from the Downtown Business Association. So wonderful package. There's 3 to be won over the period of Savour Owen Sound. Savour runs until March 13th, and we've got tonight's draw and 2 others. And I'd like to call on the mayor now to draw the winner.
I thought it was just going to give it to me.
You draw your own name, there will be suspicion.
Over 100 eggs in here just a month.
passes, so you'll have to read it.
Yes. And the winner is Tracy, I think it's Lawrence, and she had dined at Norma Jean's restaurant, and we'll be contacting her about the prize. Thank you very much for that. So again, just a reminder to savor once, savor often, and savor Owen Sound.
Good. Thank you. So it goes for, to the 13th, so that's,
It's a 3-week run altogether, so another 2 weeks to go.
so 2 more weekends, 2 full weekends.
That's right. That's
Good.
right. Plenty of
and
time still
11
to get out.
restaurants.
It's a lot of restaurants. It's wonderful just to see so many taking part, and we, I think we should be proud of that in Owen Sound.
Good, thank you very much. Any questions? Good. Seeing none, thank you.
Thanks.
So we're down to number 9 in the agenda, which is a public question period. Any questions? Seeing nobody moving quickly enough to get to the microphone to ask a question. Number 10 is correspondence. We just dealt with that. That was correspondence from the from Source Protection Committee. So 11A1 is a report from City Manager with regard to provisions of tourism services. Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Following a report to Council on November 16th, Council directed that the tourism function, the administration of tourism, move back to City Hall, and certainly Ms. Perot is back at City Hall now, and so that part of the recommendation has been completed. You also asked that we meet with representatives of the Community Waterfront Heritage Center to see if we could come to a mutually agreeable arrangement to have them provide the tourism services at the CN Rail Station. We met a number of times with them and certainly had some good negotiation. Unfortunately, Your Worship, I don't think we've come to an agreement that perhaps is beneficial to both sides. So for 2016, our recommendation is that the city will operate the tourism function from that building, and we will assess it at the end of the year how it went. Again, I believe Council's objective, as well as that of the Community Waterfront Heritage Group, is that that storefront for tourism will be open for 2016 from that building.
Okay, questions, comments? Councillor Thomas?
Is it still your intention to review that scenario at the end of a one-year period? That was in the original motion, and I'm just wondering what the plan is there.
Yes, it will be, Your Worship.
Can I just follow up? Will there be any continued negotiation with the Community Waterfront Heritage Center? I mean, I think we were all hopeful that some agreement would be reached, and I know that they had applied for a grant, which they were hoping would help facilitate, and they did not get that grant. You know, again, I think that the intention, certainly my intention when we talked about the motion originally, was to try and get somebody else handling that tourism function down there, and you've certainly got a group of committed individuals with a lot of enthusiasm and a vision of what that area of the city can be. I mean, the fact that they brought the train car there this year and have really breathed some real new interest into that area is key. And so I think that if there's some way to continue that negotiation or to keep the lines of communication open to see if there isn't some way to follow up during that year to come up with an arrangement, it would be great.
Through Your Worship, certainly communication will continue. Absolutely, they are a valued partner of the cities. As far as running the tourism operation, we're certainly going to have to start staffing arrangements ourselves. So with that, we will gear up to staff that with Ms. Perot's direction. But certainly communication with that group will continue throughout the year to see how we can continue to partner in that building. But the actual hiring of staff, we do need to get started to make sure we get good staff and the function runs as well as we certainly intend it to.
Councillor Thomas, to be clear, you're talking about looking forward into 17-18 that will continue to negotiate. You're not talking about 2016.
Well, I think that whatever's going to happen has to happen in 2016
Yeah.
because, you know, we don't want to be coming up again next January and saying, oh, what are we going to do about tourism this year? I
yeah.
think we need to come up with a plan. And I would certainly hope through service analysis review and possibly through some input from the Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee, we could come up with some options to present to council.
Okay, Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just going through this report here, it just says that, just for my understanding, will the tourism office be operating how it was previously? Will it be going back to that same level, or will it just be a couple individuals that are going to be there during those open hours?
It will be maintained, and again, Ms. Perot and I have talked about this, by certainly 2 staff members, and they will be under her direction as they were last year. We certainly will give them all the materials, all the support they need to operate that function in a manner that I believe will serve the tourists of this area very well. So will it be exactly the same as last year? I hope everything we operate is always improving.
Thank you. Further to that, I'd be more than happy to move the recommendation. I don't think this is anything against our partnership that we currently have with the Community Waterfront Foundation. It's just, I think this is just something that if we need to get something in place, and if we're not at that same level right now, then we need to get something going before this tourism season starts. So I'd be more than happy to move that recommendation.
Okay, and Deputy Mayor Wright?
I just have a question. When I was reading the report, you're talking about hiring students from May through to October. That's May, June, July, August, September, October, 6 months. Is that, students go to school in October, so September and October are school months. So tell me about that, how they're going to operate in September and October.
Well, I've certainly learned quite a bit, through your worship, quite a bit about this myself in the last few weeks, but I believe last year we were fortunate to get co-op students. Is that correct, Paulette? So we will do our best to see that we have continuing staff there for that period. And hopefully it's the same ones, but again, it really depends on who applies, if they're co-op students, et cetera. But anyone who did the hiring would have that same challenge.
And you think that you can have students in there for 6 months for less than $5,000?
I didn't say it was going to be less than $5,000, Your Worship. We will fund it again. It really very much depends on the grants that are available. We apply for those every year, and certainly we hope to maximize the grant funding that's available. I think the important thing is that the service is run to the satisfaction of council and ultimately the tourists. We will guarantee that happens.
Okay.
Going to Councillor Lemon next, and then I see Councillor O'Leary's hand coming up.
Well, the hours that it's open, I'm assuming those are going to remain essentially the same or be enhanced?
Our intent at this time is the same, 53 hours a week.
Okay, because one of the concerns I have is we don't want to have an office closed and tourists coming to the door and no one there. And I think it's really essential, because one of the things I've noticed since the changeover in the Marine Rail Museum, that the number of people coming down to that site has increased significantly. It's amazing how many people go down there, and I'm hoping that we can grow that, not decrease it, because not everybody goes on the handheld device when they're there. Sometimes they want a hard copy of things, and this is an opportunity.
Thank you. Councillor O'Leary?
Just a comment, this is only for a year, right? You're going to review it after a year. I think this is just one of those things where if we were voting with our hearts, we'd be handing out the $10,000. And, you know, after service analysis, I think there's going to be all kinds of decisions like this where we're just going to have to clamp down and do the best we can with what we have. And I'll be in favor of the recommendation. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm seeing no other hands going up. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Down to 11A2, which is a report from Ms. Allen with regard to the statement of council remuneration and expenses for 2015.
Good evening, Council. This is an annual report, and it satisfies the city's requirement under the Act to report to Council by March 31st of every calendar year a statement of remuneration and expenses paid to each member of Council and to members of local boards. Pardon me. There's 2 attachments. The first page summarizes the total remuneration and expenses paid to yourselves. The second page includes those paid to members of the Police Service Board as well as the Committee of Adjustment.
Going to go to Deputy Mayor Wright.
I will move the receipt of the report.
And Councillor O'Leary?
It's okay, but I was just going to suggest that Councillor Dodd make the motion because he's making the most money, but we'll just let that go.
I think...
Don't think so.
What's the difference, $11 or something?
I think I'm making the same as everybody else.
Leap year came early for Councillor Dodd. All in favor of receipt of that report? That's carried. Thank you. Down to number 3, which is Director of Corporate Services again, single source approval, raw sewage jockey pump. That might be Mr. Backing, is it? Who's...
Indeed.
I will certainly defer to Mr. Becking if you have any specific questions about what the raw sewage pump does. This is a single source approval from council. It does, it's more than the $30,000 threshold that requires council approval for sole sourcing as set out in our purchasing bylaw. In the description here, I have gotten some assistance. It is a raw sewage pump, and it is to replace a poorly functioning pump that is required in order for the plant to function properly. The single source does meet the requirement for sole source as per our purchasing bylaw, as it will ensure compatibility with existing infrastructure. The purchase will come out of the $60,000 budget for capital maintenance at the plant.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Now, does this pump, Ms. Allen, does it fit into a specific place, or... I'm setting her up. Mr. Becking, we're replacing a pump with basically the same thing as the idea, and it's got to fit where it's going.
You're absolutely correct, Your Worship. The thing about a jockey pump is that it maintains a constant flow, and that's crucial for getting proper disinfection of the inflow. And we had a situation where we had to throw a different kind of pump in an emergency, and we ended up exceeding our E. coli parameters. So it's critical that we get this one replaced and have it on the shelf in case we need it again in the future.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Gregg?
I think the line item that notes this is 10 to 12 weeks in delivery suggests or indicates how specialized this is, so I'd move the recommendation.
Okay, other comments, observations? Seeing none, all in favor of that recommendation? That is carried. Thank you. Number 4, it's a report from purchasing agent, request for proposal for provision of engineering services.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll speak to this one as well. This is the award of an RFP for engineering services. This will cover engineering services for 3 line items in our capital budget: the 16th Street West water main replacement, 9th Street A West sanitary sewer replacement, and 8th Street West sanitary sewer and water main installation. This was a competitive process. There were 7 respondents, and C.C. Tatum was the highest scoring proponent with a total cost of $102,000 plus HST. The note here in the analysis section, we just provided the total score that was given to each proponent by the evaluation team. C.C. Tatum did score the highest at 80.3. I will note that there is a small typo in this report. Greenland Consulting Engineers actually received a score of 70.2. That doesn't change their overall position out of the 7 that are there. The total budget for all 3 of the line items in the capital budget is $700,000. This would include all costs, including the design and ultimately the construction to completion. This RFP is for the design portion, which generally represents around 15% of the total costs and falls within that budget amount.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor McManaman?
Thank you, Worship. To Mr. Becking, is the intention that all 3 of these projects be tendered together for the construction, or would they be 3 different projects?
Your Worship, I suspect that they'll end up being 3 separate projects because they're geographically separated from one another. We'll make that final determination before we go to tender, obviously.
I would move the recommendation in the report. I think certainly for 2 of these 3, they've been waiting a long time 9th Street A West between 5th and 6th Avenue for sanitary sewer replacement, 8th Street West between 5th and 6th Avenue's been waiting a very long time. And then the third one, 16th Street West between 7th and 8th for water main replacement. So I'd be happy to move the recommendation that we approve the RFP for engineering services.
Thanks. Other questions? Councillor Lemon?
Well, first question is, was the price tag that each one of these people put forward. I couldn't seem to find that in the report.
Through your worship, because this was an RFP process, each proponent is evaluated on more than just the price. As per our purchasing bylaw, when we report on those outcomes, we provide the total score. I can say anecdotally that the total price, or the total cost that C.C. Tatum has provided was in fact the lowest. However, that is not the only thing that gave them the highest score.
Yeah, it's just that I'd like to see the price tags on bids like this rather than just a scoring system which is subjective to a degree, I believe. I'd like to know what we're getting in for financially, but you're saying that C.C. Tatum was the lowest?
It was, in fact.
Okay. The other question I've got is the engineering now is up to about 15% of each project. Is that standard? Is that to be expected in the future?
Mr. Becky?
Your worship, depending on the nature of the work, engineering can vary between about 10 and 20%. The more complex the project, obviously higher the percentage. In a bridge job, as an example, a 20% fee is not out of the norm. So in essence, yes, the answer to the question is that these fees are appropriate to the type of work that's being done.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Number 5, report from Deputy Clerk with regard to encroachment agreement, Northridge property on 8th Street East.
Your worship, this is a fairly straightforward matter. It's a building which was constructed, and the front face of the building, which fronts onto 8th Street East, is approximately, sorry, I'm having trouble seeing this one, 0.053 meters over onto the city's road allowance. All staff reviewed it and are content that a lifetime encroachment agreement be granted. The issue came to light only with a final survey, which was prepared on behalf of Northridge Property Management, Inc. Recently. There was a previous encroachment agreement for the Queen's Hotel building on the lands that was removed from title back in the fall at the request of the purchaser. Other than that, there really are no other conditions other than that they arrange for the registration at their cost, Northridge.
Good, thank you. Deputy Mayor Wright?
Thank you very much. Is this only applies to the building and not to the parking lot?
That's correct. The survey that's attached to the report shows where it's part 1 on that survey, so it's actually identified as a separate part.
Okay, well, I'll move it. That building's been there for a long time, and it should have a lifetime encroachment agreement. So I'll move it.
Good. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We're down to number 6, Director of Community Services with regard to agreement renewal with the Festival of Northern Lights. Ms. Coulter?
Thank you, Worship. Council in August had directed that we write the festival and advise them that we would like to negotiate an extension to their current agreement, which ended this past January. Staff met with the chair of the festival, Don McMillan. We've attached a red line version of the agreement for you. A few highlights: in 2016, the budget amount would be $50,000. In 2017, reduced to $45,000. And the last 3 years of a 5-year agreement, it would be at $40,000. So the agreement would end after the festival season 2021. Predominantly, the other changes were housekeeping in nature, reflecting new city departments or services that the festival actually doesn't rely on the city for, such as accounting and their website. So the agreement really has provided a solid base for the relationship between the city and festival, and for the festival to be independent and arm's length. And Your Worship, the recommendation is that Council approve a bylaw to authorize the Mayor and Clerk to execute a new 5-year agreement with the festival.
Good, thank you. Councillor Lemon?
The Festival of Northern Lights is really, really important. It brings all kinds of people into the city, and particularly into the downtown, so I would move the recommendation as read the staff report, and for renewal of the agreement with the Festival of Northern Lights. We need to support them and support them well, and we want to give them knowledge that things are going to move ahead, and I think this is important to do this now.
Good, thank you. Comments? Councillor Lemon, or sorry, the other way, Councillor McManaman?
He's younger than I am.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just let that go. Just to be clear from the report, the festival, though this agreement, we're moving into service analysis in the next month or so. They're aware that all aspects of the city operation will be looked at, including this one. They're aware of that provision.
Through Your Worship, they are. Section 4.6 and 4.7. I've noted that that part of the agreement addresses increases or decreases in funding, and the city does have the right to reduce funding in any year, undertaking to provide the festival as much notice as possible. So that remains in the agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon moved it. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Down to number 7. Report from community planners, site plan approval for East Bayshore Road, Alpha Precast.
Thank you, Your Worship. Alpha Precast operates an industrial operation which specializes in the design, manufacturing of precast concretes and site furnishings such as benches, trash receptacles, planters, etc. They have applied for site plan approval to make some drainage improvements, to pave their parking area, including the addition of accessible parking spaces, to provide loading spaces, to do some stormwater management, build berms and do landscaping, and also have a fenced asphalt area for the storage of their finished product. The site is located sort of on a triangular piece of property that's about 3 acres in area, and it's on the East Bayshore Road with some frontage on 28th Street, with another boundary being the CP Rail Trail. So the lands are designated employment in our official plan, and this type of manufacturing, assembling, fabricating is a permitted use in the plan. The application does conform to the policies of the plan, subject to the conditions recommended. The site is zoned heavy industrial or M2. The site plan is able to achieve all the site and building regulations, with the exception of a few that were provided relief through a minor variance, and those included the amount of landscaped open space, the number of parking spaces, outdoor storage in terms of the percentage on the lot, and the parking and loading areas being set back 1.5 meters from the street. I think it merits note that the city is certainly satisfied, our engineering division, with the quality and quantity of stormwater which will be leaving the site. The County of Grey notes that this does abut a county road, so an entrance permit is required for work within that right-of-way, and also an exemption to the county road setback is required. We're recommending approval subject to 3 conditions that are outlined in Appendix A, including entering into a site plan agreement with the applicant.
So if I may ask a question, the county requires an application for access to the road, but there's already access there.
Through your worship, you would really have to ask that question at the county.
Yes, I sit in the Transportation Committee, don't I? It's the wrong meeting. Okay, thank you. Other comments, Councillor Lemon?
I would move the recommendation. We want to assist industry, and this looks like something that's going to help this operation, and we should move ahead with it.
Thank you. Any other comments, observations? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Number 8, events facilitator, BRAC Classic Hill Climb and Downtown Auto Show.
Thank you, Worship. The BRAC Classic Hill Climb, which is named for Canadian driving champ Bill Brack, is a new project of the Burrellwood Motorsport Group. This group has been working with the Conservation Authority, and Mr. Cottrell's still here this evening, as well as the Township of Georgian Bluffs, the county, as well as the OPP. Mayor Boddy, you were approached by the organizing team and requested that staff attend a meeting to really learn more about the event, find out how the city could be involved, and determine what might be requested of the city. So this inaugural event will take place on the Ingalls Falls Road, which would be closed on September 17th. The event is independent of the concours, but certainly would be positioned to benefit from cross-promotion. Preceding the Saturday main event, the organizers seek to have a parade, essentially, that would leave the conservation area, have a police escort to the boundary of the city where the city's police would take over, and they'd come into the downtown. They would be asking council to close 2nd Avenue East between 8th and 10th Street for an event from about 5:30 to 8:30 in the evening. Vehicles would line up along 2nd Avenue, and there would be a public reception and street party that evening. Later that evening, they're also looking to hold a reception at the Harry Lumley Bayshore Community Center, and they have booked that facility, and it would be subject to normal arrangements with the city. So we're just asking that you receive the report and ask staff to prepare the road closure and parade permit for the auto show component of the BRAC Classic Hill Climb event.
Good. Questions? Councillor Lemon?
Well, I think this is a wonderful thing, and I would, if no one's moved the recommendation, I would so move. The one thing that was in there when I was reading it, I noticed a reference to a possible charge for the parade coming into Owen Sound by the police.
Through your worship, the event facilitator did check with police services. Sometimes costs for security and policing are passed along to the event organizer. We just wanted to make sure that council and the organizer was aware that there may be a cost from police services to provide that service. We didn't want it to come as a surprise.
Okay, and the other thing is the event downtown. Last year when they had a lot of the cars here for the First Friday, the number of people who attended that event was exponentially larger with that. So I think it's an opportunity to grow our tourism base and support this event. Is, I think, excellent. I hope there isn't going to be a large charge to it for bringing them into Owen Sound, because this is going to create a tourist attraction during the evening.
I can maybe speak to it. This is something we're very much doing in partnership or at the invitation of the Township of Georgian Bluffs. Councillor Thomas and I went out with Mr. McLeese and drove every hill in the area one day, and it's one of those memories that'll probably last a long time. It was a very fun morning. They chose up Ingalls Falls Road because they really liked it and liked the being able to set up the Conservation Authority. Working with Conservation Authority, the people will be around, be able to do tours probably back to the river and see the whole area. We spoke to a lot of people at the Art and Automobile Show, and I'll hit that, maybe my other points, in Toronto. There's a lot of people interested in this. It's people with old racing cars that are really itching to do this. So it's even going to be a little different in the cars that we'll be showing downtown from our usual local antique car club. So it'll be pretty neat. Yeah, we'll have to work out, the OPP will be giving an escort of those cars, and they can escort all the way downtown if that's what they're trying to cooperate to with the city. So we'll have to work out whether there's any charge. It's good for the area because it's going to draw people in, and it'll be a slightly different crowd than the Concord Elegance. Potentially they're going to be using Georgian College students for marshals along the route, and getting them some volunteer hours, which is good, and potentially they could be catering down at the Bay Shore. So it's a great opportunity. I keep thinking back for some of us that are old enough that remember the Beaver River rat race, and hundreds of thousands of people that would line up to watch that go by, and think of this as being a whole lot safer and a whole lot less intoxicated perhaps than some of the people were back then. Well, that's kind of what killed it, right, was the abuse of alcohol. Anyway, this won't be that type of event. That'll be a great event for the city. So any questions? Someone wants to move it?
I did.
Peter did. Thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Thanks. So that takes us to 11B, which is the consent agenda items. Ms. Stobo, are you going to run through the list?
Your worship, on the consent agenda this evening, there are planning notices where a report is triggered. The first involved the Meaford application that council considered at a previous meeting, number B02 for 2016. It had been deferred by Meaford. Council's comments were already forwarded on that consent application, and staff have no further comment. The second relates to a consent application in Meaford B04 for 2016 involving a severance in the vicinity of the Leith water supply for a lot addition to ensure a septic system is located on the same parcel as the dwelling with no new lots to be created. Planning staff have no further comment. There are 9 planning notices where no report is triggered. Minutes of boards for receipt. They're set out at items 11B4 to 7. Owen Sound Downtown Improvement Area Board of Management meetings October 21 and December 9. Owen Sound Police Services Board meeting on November 25. The Owen Sound Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation and Company meeting on January 27th of this year. There's correspondence received which is presented for the information of council. A listing appears at item 11B8. There was one business license approval which was issued to Karen Wark to operate the salon. There are minutes of committees for approval at item 11C1 to 3, Community Services Committee, Corporate Services Committee, and Economic Development and Tourism Committee.
Good. Thank you. I ask somebody to move receipt of the items in 11B. Councillor Thomas, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. If we can go back to number 4, there's 2 meetings of the DA. Councillor O'Leary, do you want to give us a brief on that?
Sure, thank you, Worship. There's 2 sets of minutes here. We had a deputation from the Artisan Streetscapes, who's a company that comes in and will light up your downtown or light up your main street. Excuse me. And they've also worked with the Festival of Northern Lights. We introduced 3 new board members, Inspector Vince Werfel, Rodney Rogers, and Lisa Cruikshank. We had a deputation from Steve Furness and Cheryl Bryan on the Downtown Revitalization Program. And we also had discussions about, speaking of classic cars, our classic car show. We set the date of July 5th, 2016. And with that, I'll move receipt of the 2 sets of
We've already
Okay.
received all of them, so
Thanks.
that's good. Any questions for Councillor O'Leary? Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a general question here, just to Councillor O'Leary. Has the DIA had any discussions on any way that they can promote more members of the downtown business owners to join that committee?
Yes. I asked at the last meeting, because I think this came up at our previous council meeting, or 2 meetings ago. So I did ask them, and Deb has sent out letters to everyone, like she has a mass email that touches on everyone when she's looking for board members, and she, you know, that's all she can do. She's contacted everyone that's, now, some of these, Rodney Rogers is, you know, at Cornblooms, and that was nice to get him back. He's been on the DIA before. But Deb has tried everything to try and get the, you know, the downtown business people involved. Now, there are other people, you know, the Boost Group is quite good, and they're, you know, they're really involved in, and the DIA works with the Boost Group. So that really helps too, that kind of in collaboration, so.
Yeah, interesting, just looking at that, including Mr. Rogers, you've got 10 members and only 4 of them are really stakeholders in the downtown core, the DIAs out of 10. So it's a minority. Hopefully something happens. Good, thank you. Owen Sound Police Board minutes, do you want to give those too?
Sure. We had a PowerPoint presentation from Inspector Vince Werfel discussing the police services business plan. The operational charges report was Highway Traffic Act, 158 charges, compliance reports 45, recorded warnings 137, Liquor License Act charges 23, criminal code charges 78. We had 138 hours of downtown foot patrol. The RIDE program, there was 48 officers used in 21 hours, 892 drivers checked, 0 roadside tests, 0 impaired driving charges, and 19 charges under the Highway Traffic Act. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Questions? Seeing none. Excellent, thank you. What comes next? Non-Profit Housing Corporation from January 27th. Who's at that? Councillor Lemon.
What was the date of that again?
January 27th.
Okay.
It's in the minutes here.
That was the last meeting, I believe, that the changeover of the council representation took place. One of the things we were looking at is working ahead on additional housing. There's been discussion on that. We are, at the present time, waiting some reports, one from the city, one from a consultant on developing a particular property for housing. And we're hoping to get that fairly soon. I imagine the city report is almost ready now. Those were the main things. They were the usual types of things. One of the things that is very impressive is both housing companies operated in the black side of their operation for the year. Both Owen Sound Housing Company and Owen Sound Municipal Nonprofit Housing operated within their budget, which is, in these times, is very, very difficult when we're getting very, very small increases in rents.
Any questions? The comments? Seeing none. Good, thank you. I think that covers everything, doesn't it? Next, we're down to 11C, which is minutes of community services meeting held on February 17th. Trying to remember. It's all changed quickly. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Just to highlight these minutes from February 17th, I was selected as chair. Councillor Thomas is the vice chair of that committee moving forward for this year. Just an overview of the community services, as this is a new committee, involve all matters related to building, planning and heritage, community programs, facility booking, special events, parks and open spaces, including the cemetery, property and building management, all recreation facilities, so quite a wide scope there. Two main things on the agenda. The first one was to approve a facade and structural improvement application for Central Variety on 8th Street, just down the street here. And just to highlight, I know some people ask about that facade and structural improvement program. The city provides a grant of a third of the project, up to $5,000, to improve their businesses, the facade of their businesses throughout the downtown. I think the budget is $40,000 a year, and for that there must be literally hundreds of thousands of dollars spent in the downtown to improve those businesses. When this first started, I wasn't necessarily a big proponent of it, but I sure am now. You just have to go down the main street and see the buildings and the improvements have been made for a small grant from the city. As I said, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, has been spent improving them. So that's the first comment. The second one, the item discussed, is a concession at the Julie MacArthur Regional Rec Center. That has been an item, now at least 5 years now since the building was in concept. We put it on RFP to try and get someone interested. There ultimately was no takers. I think we went through 3 rounds of RFPs and still didn't have a concession in the building. A food kiosk, I guess we'd call it. Actually, it's called for the provision of food services in the building. Pleased to report that we, if council approves it tonight, the recommendation that we will have one starting in April or May of this year. Terry Bartley, the Bartley family, would open a concession. The main area would be near the Y in the main corridor, near the gym. There's a glassed area just beside that. That would be the main area. Then also with for larger events, a kiosk on the 2nd floor of the arenas. Anyway, the details of the lease are here, but it's a 5-year lease. The proponent has to put out considerable money to get this up and running. So initially, the rent is more to cover costs for us. There's some plumbing and electrical work that we need to do to get it ready. They pay all taxes. The rent is indexed to the consumer price index. As I said, there'll be a mobile concession on the upper concourse. So anyway, we hope that this goes well. It's more of a, in the initial years, it certainly isn't a big money maker. It's more of a service with the hope that this starts small and can continue on for years to come. So that the committee did recommend that we move forward with that lease for a concession. Other than that, Your Worship, those are the main points of that meeting, and I would move adoption of those minutes.
Questions? No, you said the facade grant was a third that the city will pay?
Third, I'm certainly no expert on this, but it's a third of the facade we'd pay up to $5,000. Okay. So for the facade that we are dealing with tonight, it's a $3,000 grant.
I got a funny feeling that I said publicly within the last couple of weeks that it was half in error, so.
Through you, Your Worship, you may have been correct, because a double facade where you're working on the front and the rear, we pay up to half to a maximum of $7,500.
You're making me look good. I was just plain wrong. Good, thank you. Adoption of those minutes, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next one is minutes from Corporate Services Committee held February 9th, 2016. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Your Worship. This was the first ever Corporate Service Committee meeting. The elected chair was Councillor Marion Kepke. Deputy Mayor Wright is the vice chair. We approved trunking radios for the fire department that provides better communication between the fire hall and police services. Director of Corporate Services, Kate Allen, presented her report on the renewal of banking services. The city has had a long history, I believe since 1987, with the Royal Bank, and we will continue with that relationship. Louise Hurd presented the committee with the various tenders and requests for proposal awards that were awarded between July 1st, 2015 and December 31st, 2015. This is done on a biannual basis. Councillor McManaman asked staff to prepare a report in the spring regarding snow removal, which will include the various costs, parking lots, and hired contractors for council's information, including the 2014-15 and 2015-16 seasons, so that'll be coming down the pipe. And with that, I'll move adoption of those minutes.
I think we surprised somebody, but go ahead, Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Well, no, I read the minutes earlier, and I just said that'll teach me not to go away on a winter vacation, won't it?
I think what our thinking is at the next meeting you could resign if you didn't want to be the deputy chair, but we guess we should have told you before now.
Oh, I knew this afternoon.
Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, there's a slight error in the minutes. Under staff present, Linda McDonald recording $Ecatary/corporate services. It should be an S, not a $.
Well, in corporate services, we always add up the money first, Councillor Lemon. We just wanted to see if you'd catch that. Okay. So with that correction of a typing error, all in favor of Councillor O'Leary's motion to adopt those? That's carried. Thanks. Number 3, minutes of Economic Development Tourism Advisory Committee. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not the first meeting of this committee, but the first meeting for this year. So one of the orders of business was to approve the terms of reference and look at the work plans for the economic development and tourism and small business areas. We also move forward with the next step of the downtown revitalization project by authorizing approval to sign, if council passes these minutes tonight, to sign the administrative agreements and memorandums to get that study fully and truly underway. That was the main business of the meeting, and right at the end we had a brief discussion which actually got quite exciting for a moment there about condo development growth in the region of Waterloo. And over the past year at Economic Development, one of our members about a year ago said, maybe we've got the approach a little bit wrong and we should start looking at the way we do things. And the point was made that we do devote a lot of time and energy to the Toronto market when we're promoting economic development and tourism in Owen Sound, when in fact, if you look at trends in Ontario, many people from the GTA tend to travel to the north, to the Muskoka area for their holiday time and their travel time, whereas in this region it tends to be people from the Golden Triangle and London, Windsor, who gravitate more towards the Lake Huron, Bruce Peninsula, Georgian Bay side. And so we did have quite a spirited discussion about that, and we'll have further discussions about the possibilities of looking at the way that we promote Owen Sound and perhaps making some changes to try to capitalize on all of the development and growth that is going on in the Waterloo region. And that was primarily what we talked about, and I would move these acceptance of these minutes.
And may the conversation always be spirited. Questions, comments? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. We don't have any minutes from closed meeting. Other business, we're there already. Councillor Thomas, you had 3 items.
Yes, Your Worship. My first item is regarding the Police Services Act consultations. I'll come to that one last. Police Services Act consultations that are being conducted by the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services, and we did receive an email from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario this afternoon regarding some of their positions on it and a list of the meetings. I guess the 2 closest meetings that are being held to Owen Sound are in Stratford on March the 18th and possibly Brampton on March 23rd. And I just had a question for the city manager about this whole process and whether we're going to have some involvement or make some comment in terms of our views.
Through your worship, certainly I do have the guide before you. It's 18 pages. I have got through approximately half of it this evening. Certainly there's nothing in there that I don't think council would support, but we will certainly be bringing that information back to council. There are 2 video briefings, one on March the 3rd, one on March the 8th by AMO, and I will certainly be attending those and would encourage any councillor that wish to also sit in. I certainly think it's important that we pass on our views through the appropriate channels. Policing costs in Ontario are a large cost to all municipalities. This is our opportunity to get our voice forward. So we will certainly be advising council on this issue and discussing perhaps with the chief exactly what our position would be to put forward.
Great, thank you. Second item, I'd like to remind people with an interest and my children about the Community Job Fair that's happening this Thursday up at the Heritage Place Shopping Centre from 2 o'clock until 6 o'clock. Now, this is being held in partnership with the YMCA and the City of Owen Sound and the County of Grey. There will be approximately 50 employers on site that day taking resumes, asking questions, meeting people. So it's, I certainly, my oldest son took part in one 5 years ago and had a job within 15 minutes of the job fair ending. So I certainly can say that it's well worth going to for people who are looking for employment or summer employment. The final item, it gives me a lot of pleasure to bring this one forward. I had the opportunity on Friday night to represent Mayor Boddy and the council and the residents of Owen Sound at the 2015 Lieutenant Governor's Ontario Heritage Awards. And you know, my focus, I announced one night at council that the Community Waterfront Heritage Centre was winning an award, but I was very excited when I got there and got my program to realize that, in fact, Owen Sound was represented by 3 different individuals and groups at the awards, out of 20 awards handed out. So it was quite a night for Owen Sound at the awards. And the first person up was Robert Alexander from the city of Owen Sound, who had won a title for a Heritage Award for Lifetime Achievement for his, did the slideshow disappear? Oops. Well, we know what Robert looks like. You know, it was wonderful. He's been a volunteer at Grey Roots for many, many years, and he did win a Heritage Award for Lifetime Achievement. The second winner from Owen Sound was a young lady named Melanie Pledger, who was an OSCVI student who did a project on Owen Sounders in World War I, and she was a recipient of the Heritage Award for Youth Achievement. And of course, the third award was the Heritage Award for Excellence in Conservation, which went to the Community Waterfront Heritage Centre for its efforts in preserving and maintaining the Marine and Rail Museum. So it was a really proud night for Owen Sound at those awards, and I think that all of those groups and organizations and people deserve a hearty thanks from the residents of this city and from this council for the efforts that they put forward in keeping us current and keeping us out there.
Good.
Thank you.
So it was right in the legislature? Where was the...
It was actually right in the front lobby at Queen's Park, so there was not even a need to find one's way around. You walked in, and there you were. So
nice.
It was, and then, of course, there was a soiree in the Lieutenant Governor's suite afterwards.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Councillor O'Leary, thanks for doing that.
Thank you. I attended the Good Roads Conference in Toronto last week with Mayor Boddy, and seminars that I attended were establishing asset management priorities, making the most of your council term, selling your asset management plan to the public, new accountabilities and challenges for municipalities, and dealing with the extreme temperatures in aging infrastructure. The keynote speakers that I got to see were Gary McNamara from AMO, the AMO president, Kathleen Wynne, Premier of Ontario, the Ministers Forum. There's 18 ministers that, including the Premier, that took questions from the audience, and I think out of the 30 questions, none of them were answered. They just stuck handled around them. Mike Moffat, Chief Economist, and Patrick Brown, leader of the PC Party. And I should mention that Councillor Gregg and Councillor Dodd joined us for one day out of those 2, and it was a very informative couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you. Just review a couple of things that I did. I went down early Saturday and Sunday last weekend to join the Concord Elegance crew from Cobble Beach. Art in the Automobile had 17 cars on display at the automobile show. On Saturday, I was there with Warden and neighbor Mayor Al Barfoot and Meredith Bowers, who unfortunately we're losing from Grey County Economic Development. She's going on to a different job. Fun day, beautiful, beautiful cars. A lot of the owners of the cars were around, and they're raving about being up in the Owen Sound area in Cobble Beach. One from Oil City, Pennsylvania, that will be coming early next time because he wants to go to Tobermory and he wants to see Sauble Beach and he wants to spend more time in Owen Sound. And that seemed to be the general feeling of people that were coming through, that they were coming up for this. So I was there the next day as well with Rob and Rosemary McLeese, and just handing out pamphlets and maps for the area. And there was a lot of people picking up pamphlets for everything from saints and sinners and maps of the area, Apple tours. It was, I don't know how many tens of thousands of people we would have spoken to going through. On Sunday, moved from Friends residence down to the hotel for Good Roads. Two things that I note, Brad Dogood, Minister of Economic Development, Employment and Infrastructure, I was going to say hinted at, but it was probably more than a hint, that funding for the Swift Broadband project for southwestern Ontario appears to have been approved at the provincial level, and they're just waiting for the federal government to approve it, to do their due diligence, is the word he used, and they hope to announce that soon. Didn't say that they're going to, but it was pretty clear that was what he intended. The other speaker that stood out for me was the economist Mike Moffat, who is forecasting. He went through the history of how our economy has turned for the last approximately 20 years of post-war baby boom with the first North America trade agreement and how that affected free trade. We're moving into what he considered to be the next big era for free trade, which will be around Asia, with the population there and the lack of post-war baby boom growth and purchasing power in Ontario, that it will be a massive opportunity to trade with Asia. And one of the growth areas will be value-added, high-quality products, because we can't compete at the dollar value, and high-quality and safe agri-foods, which is certainly something the economic development the Grey County is working on, and I think confirms our attempt to be able to do things with China and hopefully build something on that. The other thing that I got to do, which was pretty special, is to go to center ice of the attack game on Saturday night on behalf of the city, present a really class gentleman, young man, 16-year-old Connor Roberts, who has been playing AAA with the Grey Bruce Highlanders. He represented Canada at the World Youth Olympic Games in Lillehammer. They won a silver medal. He's a graduate of Owen Sound Minor Hockey. I understand that he has a bright future in hockey going forward, and he was a really nice kid to hang around with for a half an hour and be able to have a chat. Real class act. So look forward to seeing how his hockey career goes going forward. And if it doesn't go forward as far as it'll go, I don't think it'll matter. He'll do fine. So that was it was pretty nice to be able to do that. So those are the main events. I think I counted 26 events or meetings over a 3-week period that I attended, but those are the highlights. So. With that, that completes other business. Motion that committee rise and report.
Moved by myself that the committee rise and report.
All in favor? That is carried. Back into the formal session. So a resolution adopting proceedings in committee of the whole.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Dodd, that the action taken in committee of the whole in considering public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business be confirmed by this council.
And all in favor? Good, thank you. Any notices of motion? Seeing none, down to 16, new business by resolution, and we have no new business. So we're down to bylaws. Carolyn or Jeff, do you want to give us a run through?
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 5 bylaws in tonight's agenda. 1 to confirm the business of tonight's meeting. 2 bylaws to execute agreements authorized by Council for the use of the Julie MacArthur Regional Recreation Centre for the Sunday Morning Hockey League Players Association Easter Hockey Tournament, and an agreement with the Bartley family for the operation of the Buff Bistro at the Julie MacArthur Regional Recreation Centre. A bylaw to adopt the sums for the 2016 operating and capital budgets, and a bylaw to adopt a revised agreement with the Ontario Infrastructure and Lands Corporation for financing of capital works at the wastewater treatment plant.
Good.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Dodd, that bylaw numbers 2016-21, 22, 23, 24, and 2016-25 be passed and enacted.
And all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So the main thing I note in there was the bylaw to adopt the budget, basically. Woo-hoo! So that's done. That concludes all of our business for tonight. So I can never read that clock. What time is it? 8:45. We conclude our business. Thanks, everybody.